On April 21st, 1838, John Muir was born in the world's greatest country, Scotland. Dunbar, Scotland, to be exact. In 1849, at the age of 11, John Muir and his family moved to the United States. They first settled at Fountain Lake Farm for 7 years, which is in present-day Marquette County, Wisconsin. They homesteaded 160 acres, and this place is thought to be one of the first places in American culture where any American thought to preserve nature for the sake of nature. John described the area as sunny woods overlooking a flowery glacial meadow and a lake rimmed with water lilies. After 7 years at Fountain Lake, the Muir family moved to Hickory Hill Farm near Portage, Wisconsin. John Muir's dad was harsh, and he had the family work from dawn until dusk. But in this harsh disciplinary environment, John and his brothers got short periods of free time where they would explore the fields and woods of the Wisconsin countryside. He continued to fall in love with nature as he grew up. And eventually, John started inventing things, some being accurate clocks and some being wondrous devices. One example being a device that tipped John out of bed before dawn. In 1860, at the State Fair in Madison, Wisconsin, John took his inventions and he won admiration and prizes. During this year, he also entered the University of Wisconsin. He was a good student, but he dropped out after only 3 years to travel to the northern United States and do many odd jobs throughout the land less touched by civilization. In 1867, Muir had an eye injury that gave him wanderlust, because he could not see for a month. But when his eye healed, he decided to look into the wilderness. His adventure started when he decided to walk 1,000 miles from Indianapolis to the Gulf of Mexico. Then he sailed to Cuba and then to Panama. After that, he sailed up the west coast of the United States, and in March of 1868, only 1 year after the eye injury, he landed in San Francisco. John Muir quickly decided that California would be his home. The reason for this was because he was captured so fast by the state, by his travels in Yosemite and the Sierra Nevada. After his first time in this new landscape, he built a pine cabin, his home, in Yosemite. After some time, in 1871, Muir discovered living glaciers in Yosemite, and he created a theory of the glaciation of Yosemite. This was very controversial at the time, and because of this, he began to become known throughout the country. In 1874, Muir wrote a series of articles called Studies in the Sierra. These articles launched his successful career as a writer. Eventually, he moved out of Yosemite to Oakland, California, and he traveled to many places from there. In 1880, he married Louis Wanda Strenzel, and they moved to Martinez, California, where they had 2 daughters, Wanda and Helen. In his now fairly domestic life, he partnered with his father-in-law to manage a family fruit ranch. But since that was not enough to feed his lust for wander, he continued to travel to Alaska, a place he loved. He also went to Australia, South America, Africa, Europe, China, Japan, and many, many times to the Sierra Nevada. Muir became a serious writer, publishing 300 articles and 10 books, all of which recounted his travels, talked about his philosophy on the natural world, and encouraged everyone to go to the mountains. Eventually, Muir wrote another series of articles that talked about the devastation of mountain meadows and forests by sheep and cattle. These were published in Century magazine. After that, the associate editor of Century magazine, Robert Johnson, and Muir worked at fixing this destruction. So in 1890, because of the efforts by Muir and Johnson, Yosemite National Park was created by Congress. John Muir also helped the creation of Sequoia, Mount Rainier, Petrified Forest, and Grand Canyon National Parks. Because of Muir's extensive efforts on land conservation, he is often called the father of our national park system. Many people suggested to Muir that some sort of association should be made to protect all these new national parks from stockmen and others who had ruined the boundaries of the parks. So, in 1892, he and his supporters created the Sierra Club. In Muir's words, the aim of the Sierra Club was to do something for wilderness and make the mountains glad. He served as the president until he died. In 1901, Muir talked about President Theodore Roosevelt in his new book, Our National Parks, And 2 years later, in 1903, Roosevelt went to Yosemite to visit Muir. There, the two of them created the foundation for Roosevelt's conservation programs. Even with the support of the president, the Sierra Club had many battles over Yosemite and the Sierra Nevada, one being the campaign to prevent the damming of the Hetch Hetchy Valley inside Yosemite. But in 1913, Muir lost that battle, and one of his most favorite glacier-carved valleys was dammed and a reservoir was created to supply water to San Francisco. Muir was right about this controversy, though, because only 3 years later, the public was in outrage over this dam being created. Thus, the National Park Service Act was created. This made sure that the national parks would be preserved and managed for the enjoyment of all Americans. And in many ways, this controversy over the Hetch Hetchy Dam sparked our nation's conservation movement. Unfortunately, though, Muir did not get to see the National Park Service Act be enforced or get to see our conservation movement start, as he died on December 24th, Christmas Eve, 1914, from pneumonia. He was 76 years old. John Muir was a farmer, inventor, sheep herder, explorer, writer, and he was America's most influential naturalist and conservationist. He remains an inspiration to environmental activists everywhere, even to this day. So, why should you care about John Muir? Well, today the Earth is suffering from pollution. Carbon dioxide levels in the sky are at an all-time high. Climate change is happening very fast in the spectrum of all time. Knowing about John Muir may hopefully inspire you to help the natural world. And also, he is still part of the environmental movement today, which, in this age, we need more people like him, so he's a good person to know about.